Hello everyone to the HyperNest podcast. During this conversation, we interview some of the most knowledgeable and DeFi OG in the space coming from the top protocols in the world. Today we have the great pleasure of chatting with Chris, the CEO of Summerfi, and we're going to touch on the incredible innovation in Summerfi, how they produce yield, the AI twist in Lazy Summer, and many more. But before we get into the weeds, I would like to ask Chris to introduce himself because he's a super OG of DeFi, working first at MakerDAO, now at Summerfi. So tell us a little bit about you and about your journey into the magical world of DeFi.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on here. It's a real pleasure. But yeah, as you said, started the journey back in MakerDAO back in 2018. So kind of first half 2018. Joined them as one of their first product managers. They're kind of responsible for the front end, like primarily the front ends and so on, but also obviously the continued MCD, multi-collateral DAI development at the time, which felt very close, but still had quite a long way to go until it finally launched in November 2019. Prior to that, though, I was in the wealth management, like digital wealth management industry as a product manager again. So still trying to kind of improve UX for like kind of ordinary people to improve savings and so on. And yeah, the opportunity to kind of jump into DeFi, particularly with Maker, where you were borrowing against on-chain assets and so on. And even back then, the vision for RWAs was kind of being talked about a little bit. And from my own personal point of view, being able to potentially borrow against kind of like ETFs and things like that, bringing ETFs on chain and maybe being able to borrow against them. Instead of having to always withdraw your money if you ever needed money for the life event or so on, you could borrow against it for a cheaper rate than you're earning. Was kind of a great vision, and it's kind of crazy that we're like kind of 7 years in now, and we're maybe now starting to get maybe a little bit closer to that. There's talk of like ETFs coming on chain. There's obviously US Treasuries and stuff coming on chain now and so on. But yeah, it's been a really kind of awesome journey, and like you said, kind of moved out of Maker. In 21 into where we took Oasis .app at the time out of MakerDAO as the Maker Foundation was dissolving, given it had done its job for the community and so on, and and then rebranded Oasis.app to Summerfi in the summer of 23, and yeah, here we are today. Kind of just recently launched the latest Summer protocol earlier this year, and trying to redefine yield as you kind of touched on.
That's fantastic. Thanks a lot for giving us a little bit more information about your journey. I like how you said, 7 years ago we're discussing about borrowing against ETF. Now it's almost materialized, I think. But we need to that at the beginning of the journey, everyone was thinking that we were crazy. Now we are less crazy, right? At least because these things are happening. And,
that's it. Yeah.
Right. So, okay, you already introduced basically my next question, that it's how the vision of Summerfi, changed a little bit from being a little bit like the front end of MakerDAO with Oasis app to being a multi-protocol, super yield optimizer, UX crazy good app for the users of every day.
Yeah, so obviously, like I said, in 2021, Oasis.app, when it moved out of Maker, was just a front end for the Maker protocol for multi-collateral DAI. You could mint DAI against any of the assets and so on. In 21, it was June 21 when it kind of moved out into its own entity. We very quickly added Multiply to that then to enable you to kind of one-click, like kind of leverage exposure basically to Ethereum, Bitcoin primarily, like wrap BTC and so on. But yeah, in November 21, we also launched our first yield product, which was our G-Uni using Gelato. Gelato is kind of a Uniswap v3 position management tool where we had this like 50x, initially 20x, but then 50x G-Uni strategy that was using Maker vaults underneath, and it was hugely popular. I mean, we were like hitting the MakerDAO like debt ceilings like within a couple of hours every time they were raised. I think we got very quickly to like 250 million within those, and it was a hugely popular product. And as a team, we kind of talked then about actually aiming to be like, we can actually probably redefine yield and actually make some really nice yield strategies kind of on this. And in 22, we kind of set out to like kind of as a target really to redefine yield, make Oasis.app at the time kind of a place for yield, but also for like advanced users, obviously for the leverage and the multiply and so on, but then for simpler users, be a brand new place for yield and innovate on yield products. But come kind of middle of 22, Luna Terra kind of happened, then FTX happened, the whole market went down, DeFi yields almost went to zero. The DAI savings rate from Maker went to like 0.01%. And yield was kind of almost dead in the water for a couple of years. US Treasuries then started to kind of pick up and increase, and then like suddenly like DeFi yields were not the cool hot thing. Money was leaving DeFi, and we went back to like kind of integrating more protocols and so on. And then last year, DeFi kind of started to make a resurgence kind of in 23, like late 23 into 24. And we refocused, we pivoted a little bit to focus back onto yield, because that's where the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions of users are going to be using DeFi in the future. And so on, like multiply products, leverage products, they're great for a very small minority of users, but it really is a kind of niche market for people that know what they're doing. We saw the kind of new perp exchanges coming along. We now see things like Hyperliquid and so on that do what like Multiply does. It's a whole lot better, really, in a whole much easier way and so on. We kind of went back to what we originally set out to try and do, really kind of nail yield, basically, and set out to build a product that basically allowed users to earn the best risk-adjusted yield on the market without having to do anything. Kind of that's why we kind of went with the name the lazy protocol, the lazy summer protocol. Like, you deposit, you sit back, you relax, you don't have to worry about a thing. Kind of like the original kind of digital wealth management space. You put your money in, you leave it for maybe 5-10 years or whatever, and you don't need to worry. Maybe you set up recurring payments, you go in and deposit a little bit more here and there and so on. But that's what we wanted to build at Summer. It would reallocate to the highest yielding protocols at all times. It's independently risk managed, so like as a user you can trust the risk management side. But it was all kind of taking learnings from that original kind of like digital wealth management space that obviously has like tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in kind of globally, and making that into kind of bringing that into DeFi and so on. And I think we've done that. I think we've tried like the UX of the app. Even we tried to make kind of like a wealth management looking tool in a way, kind of showing projections of what you could be earning based on the kind of back data and so on. And and it's been hugely popular. Just launched in February time. Already it's like 130, 140 million TVL very quickly, and it's growing very fast. But it feels like we came full circle from like late 21 into 22, where we set out to build kind of the best place to earn yield in DeFi, and that was safe and sustainable. Like, those are two crucial things. There was a lot of yield apps in DeFi in 21, 22, but they definitely weren't sustainable. Like, you were constantly having to change your position or chase different token farming projects, and they didn't feel always that safe. There was a lot of obviously hacks going on. There's still a lot of hacks recently in the last couple of like months and so on as well. But like Summerfy is there to provide safe, sustainable yield to the masses in the future and institutions ultimately.
I love that. I love the philosophy of making basically a super DeFi heavy protocol as simple as a fintech app, almost like the Robinhood of fintech app, right? The Revolut of fintech app, and it feels very, 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 very good, because I think everyone in the world is talking about onboarding the next billion of users. You know, it's kind of the most abused sentence in the world, but no one is. I mean, the majority of people don't do anything. They make DeFi more and more complex and more complex and more complex. So I'm really, really happy that you're going in this direction full power. However, you're still, just for context, you have the all lazy summer protocol that is ultra simplified, ultra one click, and it's going to work. But you also have the Summerfy Pro. Just want to mention that, because I think also that part of your protocol is very interesting. Maybe you just want to provide some information about this division between these two area of your protocols, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Summerfy Pro, like this basically still is like what started off as the Maker front end back in 2019. In some ways, 2018, when we had the single collateral DAI front end that was just on the Maker domain, not the Oasis domain. But Summerfy Pro, I think it's still people still manage over $3 billion of collateral on Summerfy Pro. There's about over 200 million in the automation contracts as well. But it's a much more sophisticated app. It allows you to borrow against different assets. It enables you to multiply and control your kind of leverage exposure on different assets. It's very, very manual. It's almost a kind of daily a daily management tool in some senses, particularly with the volatile price movements we sometimes see. Not so much the last few days when ETH has been going up. It generally, you know that you're pretty safe, but you maybe want to increase your exposure and so on. But yeah, there are automation tools to make that a little bit easier. But with everything in DeFi, like kind of, you still need to keep an eye on your automation tools. You still need to manage them and so on. So yeah, I mean, for context, like it's got billions of dollars being managed on it on there, but it has actually fewer users than the Lazy Summer protocol, for example, and it just shows the difference, right? It's about like probably 3 to 5% of the TVL, but fewer users and so on. So that's the key difference and so on. And yeah, I mean, to your point around kind of the billions of users and so on, everyone's like, we're going to onboard the next billion users and so on, like. Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about that. In reality, I think everyone expects us maybe to onboard these billions of users through protocol front ends and like kind of DeFi front ends and so on. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. Like, ultimately, we need to create protocols that can be integrated into the apps people use already today. And those protocols have got to be the simplest protocols as possible that provide that real value to users. And in reality, what 99% of people do around the world is they save, if they can, they try and save their money somewhere. And yeah, if we can help them save their money and solve that problem, yeah, whether in banks or in unbanked, or whether it's on a mobile phone, like through SMS saving still and things like that, whether it's like kind of in your bed or whatever, yeah, like we want to make saving as simple as possible in the future. And yeah, DeFi is the technology layer ultimately to be able to make that one possible and kind of equal for everybody, basically. So yeah, we want to use this new technology to kind of effectively replace the existing like kind of institutions and so on, really, like not necessarily replace them, but replace the infrastructure of the institutions and so on that they're using today, the kind of black boxes, the kind of unfair rules and so on.
Really, really love your vision, your philosophy is completely aligned with what Hypernest does. Hypernest exists for the only reason of support open innovation on chain and creating a more equitable digital world, preventing financial exclusion. So very cool, completely aligned. What type of, on the UX side, still on the simplification for the masses, what type of innovation Summerfy is bringing on the table? Just as an overview, and then we're going to go into the details of those.
Yeah, so I think from the UX point of view, I mean, I think the automated rebalancing and so on, like taking away, in reality, from the UX point of view, it's removing the need for the users to do anything in some ways. But yeah, I mean, the automated rebalancing, we have the AI side you mentioned at the very top of the call. Kind of, we have this AI aspect. So we use AI to do the automated rebalancing. That basically tries to optimize the market yield as best as it can. Instead of always being in a kind of yield chasing mode, it tries to predict, it tries to kind of foresee and use patterns in the data of exactly what's going to happen and when, and move the money around, and so on. So yeah, that uses that to optimize the yield. But it's really, from a UX point of view, we kind of ask ourselves, how can we allow the users to be as hands off as possible, ultimately, and then earn the best risk adjusted yield. We think having the independent risk manager as well is the kind of big thing, because it shows that kind of we don't become unaligned in what we're trying to do. So we don't end up trying to chase the highest yields all the time, kind of push the risk limits or anything like that. Like, the risk manager sets the risk parameters, they're enforceable on chain. They decide exactly what parameters need to go on there. We have the concept of lower risk and higher risk vaults for some assets where users can decide to take that slightly higher risk. Generally, that just has like peg and swap risk included, but you potentially expose yourself to slightly higher yield and so on. But yeah, from a UX point of view, really the innovation is how can we just remove functionality away from the user to give them the option to deposit, withdraw, or switch to a different vault. And that is really all we want to allow them to do for the simplest, cleanest experience possible. We have account abstraction in there, so people can sign up with like email addresses, use passkey and so on. Lots of different ways that use social login and things like that. Like, we've seen it successful in some apps. Like, we don't have a huge amount of users using it at the moment. We still very much have a kind of core DeFi audience that still, I think, trusts like EOAs and things like that, and so on. But I think that's because we're still kind of a bit further down the kind of DeFi rabbit hole than probably on the full blown retail side at the moment. But yeah, from a UX point of view, that is probably the key things at the moment. But all in the name of just making it as simple as possible.
And I think it's already great, right? This combination of AI account abstraction to simplify DeFi to the best possible. And I would like to dive deeper a little bit on the AI implementation because, well, nowadays everyone is talking about AI. It doesn't matter what you do, there is a part of AI, right? You know, you have even, you know, the barman downstairs uses some AI to create a little bit of your breakfast in the morning to make it a little bit more delicious. But apparently Summerfy is using AI for real. So I would like to know a little bit more. I think that the usage of AI is mostly in the Lazy Summer protocol, but correct me if I'm wrong. And basically you are using AI on two sides. On one side, you are increasing yield, and on the other side are helping users. So users don't need to click, but the AI model is doing it for them. So I would like to know a little bit more how you arrived to this specific conclusion. So maybe you have done, you know, of course, some back tests, check the magic, if the magic was working. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So if we start off where the AI is being used, it's being used in the rebalancing keepers, ultimately for the protocol. So the protocol in reality, if we just kind of take one step back, has three core components. It has the vaults and the markets that it allocates to. It has the risk manager that sets the risk caps, and then it has the AI powered rebalancing keepers that rebalance all the money that's within the vaults to the relevant markets up to the risk cap set by the risk manager. So three kind of independent parties in all of that. The AI is on the rebalancing keepers. And how it works is we have, I think it's 5 AI agents running at any one time that are monitoring the markets for each vault and so on, looking at all the data, taking in that data to kind of conjoining it with all of the back data as well, and using that kind of machine learning there as well, and so on, to effectively help it to predict and move the money around to the most optimized markets as well. And even when the markets have a dip and so on, understanding kind of what might cause that dip, and to know if the money is going to, if the rate is going to probably immediately increase, because within DeFi a huge repayment would obviously cause a huge dip in the real-time yields. But then if they withdraw the collateral, then the utilization is pretty much going to go back to how it was, and the yield is going to go back up. If we're not careful, and if you just have a very basic rule set, obviously you can be moving money out very quickly at that point, and then the yield jumps back up again, and then you need to move the money back in. So you're kind of always chasing if you're not careful, and actually it might be more efficient just to leave it in there, and so on. So the AI, we have these 5 separate agents that are running. They effectively plug into a multi-sig, and what needs to happen is at least 3 agents at any one time need to propose the same rebalancing strategy for the rebalancing strategy to execute. So yeah, that's kind of there. It is to optimize the yield to be better than it could be if it's just a very simple rule-based system. What we did kind of back last year when we were testing all this is we back tested the rule-based system on 6 months worth of data to kind of say where we would move money around based on the rules and how that would improve the yield. We achieved around about 20% better yield based on the rule-based system, and then and then with the AI side as well, that then actually made, I think it was around another 10% better on top of that. So yeah, the rule-based system was a 20% better on kind of, if you just left your money in a single protocol, on average it was around 20% better. Like the kind of minimum cutoff we wanted was a 20% better return, particularly on the kind of main blue chip protocols, so kind of Aave, Compound, Morphos, and so on. If you just leave it in a single market, the Lazy Summer protocol should at least beat that by at least 20%. And you can actually see that through the kind of thing. And then with the AI thing, it beats it by another 10% generally as well. Just optimizing the market, trying to kind of like better move the money around and make sure the money is where it needs to be at any one time, and try and predicting where the kind of yields are going and so on. But yeah, that was all done through backtesting. It validated it, and I think we see the results now if you look inside the app and compare it to all the protocols that are supported, and so on.
That's super sweet. So you basically use more than one agent at a time in order to have less biased potentially decisions, and you were able to bring first a 20% increase compared with just rule-based system and another 10% to the AI magic. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
All right, fantastic. Okay, and And someone now might ask, okay, cool, but how can we trust the AI model right now? What if there is, a problem in the algorithm? What if everyone is suggesting the wrong things? So probably we should also discuss how these AI decision-making process is connected, though, with Block Analytica, that in the end of the day, is also checking if everything is going to be okay all the time, right?
Yeah. So Block Analytica are the independent risk managers. So if in the absolute worst case, the AI allocates money to the wrong market, the worst case scenario is you're just going to be earning a little bit less yield than you would be, because the risk manager sets all of the risk caps. There's effectively two risk caps for each market that they set. There is the absolute TVL number, which could be something like $40 million or 40 million USDC, for example. So no more than 40 million USDC can be deposited into Aave, for example, or it might be no more than 60% of the entire Vault TVL can ever go into the Aave market at one time as well. So effectively what that does is even if the AI wants to put 100% of the funds in one of the vaults into one market because it's gone a bit crazy, like the risk caps are going to stop that happening anyway. So with the risk caps, you're never going to be exposed to one single protocol at any one time. Anyway, you're always going to have some sort of automated diversification on there with the risk caps and so on. But again, like, because you've got these three components, as we talked about before, the markets that are controlled by the DAO. So the DAO onboards and offboards markets. But even if they onboard a market, the risk manager has to set a positive deposit cap for it. So if a meme trading DEX gets added by governance because it's offering 200% yield, but the risk manager doesn't believe it's safe to deposit any capital into there, no matter how much like governance wants that, like votes to have that onboarded, if the risk manager never sets that risk cap greater than 0, no money can ever be allocated from the AI keepers, for example. So there's kind of checks and balances around the entire system, and if the risk manager, if governance feels like the risk manager is setting a market too high, or it's too risky, taking too much risk on a particular market, again, governance can vote to remove that market, and so on. So there isn't really a single party that can ever do anything like without basically the consensus of the other market of the other participants within the ecosystem, basically. So there's a lot of checks and balances there, and ultimately all that's there to protect the user and protect the user funds. And again, that's why we always talk about it's the best risk-adjusted yield in the market. It may not always be the absolute best yield because there's always one protocol with the very highest yield, and we'll never go 100% into any single protocol in case that protocol is obviously having issues. The other thing and kind of safety mechanism we have here from a user point of view is the risk manager has the power to set risk caps to 0 after they've already been allocated to. And once the risk manager sets a risk cap to 0 after it's already been allocated to, that tells the keepers to immediately withdraw all the capital from that market. So if the risk manager has been informed that there is an issue, there is a bug, and it's going to be announced in 2 hours or something like that, they can be ready to set that risk cap to 0 as soon as it becomes public, and then the keepers would automatically withdraw all capital from that market. So that's also hugely beneficial because in most cases, most users are not going to see or hear about a bug or an issue with the protocol probably until it's too late. And we know that there are multiple times where like there are certain actors and certain people within the industry that get told and are told about these things to help remove as much capital as possible. But in the cases where it's just end users depositing into these markets, they're generally always the last ones to find out. And unfortunately, normally it's too late once they do find out. And even if it's just an hour or so, that can be too late. So the fact that we have this safety mechanism as well means that hopefully there is a little bit less risk of users losing any capital, because again we have a kind of trusted source that people can go to inform. In there, they're a very public face on there as well, and again they don't have any delays in any of the parameters they want to change, for the very reason that they can adjust these risk parameters without having to wait 24 hours or 2 hours or 48 hours, depending on which protocol and stuff is. But again, they're very limited. The risk manager cannot choose any markets to onboard without governance's say so, and governance has the delay. So governance has the kind of 48-hour delay or whatever to onboard markets, but the risk can only increase or decrease risk parameters. So it's kind of a lot of kind of consideration around what could happen in a worst case scenario, and in reality the worst case scenarios are limited as much as as I can be from our point of view.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for explaining a little bit the bipartisan somehow system. To paraphrase it, so you have on the governance side, you're going to whitelist usually, and considering the protocol you're working with, only great protocols that usually have a high level of security per se, and at the same time also you're not going to use any assets in the world that might depeg tomorrow. So there is already a few good consideration on the whitelisting side, but on top of it there is a risk curator, in this case Block Analytica, that first of all assign the liquidity different protocols according probably to a risk score or a much more complex, and to simplify, let's call it risk score. This risk score will also change along with the market swing, with the market condition, and so on and so forth. So in real time, they might decide, for example, to put the risk score very high for one protocol and therefore allocation to zero, and the money are withdrawn. Is that a good paraphrasis of that?
Yeah, 100%. And we've seen some good examples of that recently, where where Bybit was hacked couple of months ago now. Yeah. There obviously Bybit had around 20%, I think 20 to 25% of Athena backing on there, and there was a number of protocols that had a lot of kind of USDE and SUSD exposure to them as collateral as well. So and obviously the risk there was that potentially USDE depegged. Potentially, obviously didn't happen and so on. But within about 10-15 minutes of the Bybit hack being announced, Block Analytica had a transaction ready to execute, which would have set all protocols. There was a number of Morpho markets, I think Aave, and I think an Euler market or two that had quite a lot of USDE exposure to it, and they were ready to set those protocols to zero to remove all effectively lending deposits out of those markets to make sure they were not exposed to the potential of USDE falling over. The same happened, I think, last week when USDF, gonna hopefully not got the wrong one, but when USDF depegged slightly, that was in one or two markets as collateral that we supported, and they lowered the caps quite quickly on those ones as well until it was okay, and then increased them again a few days later once kind of everything had passed and the peg had been regained and so on. So yeah, we've got some really good examples of where they've been extremely reactive very quickly. Unfortunately, nothing has ever happened, but there is that there as well. And in the future, we actually hope that the AI agents as well can actually start to do some kind of threat detection analysis as well. And even before potentially even Block Analytica have removed capital from them, that if the AI agents suspect that there is some sort of threat or some sort of hack in progress, because the rates and so on go outside of kind of normal expected ranges and so on over a certain period of time, then they can also automatically withdraw funds as well from the underlying protocols. And we all know that kind of AI stuff is going to work much faster than humans, particularly as it gets it right more and more and more in the future. I don't think we're there yet, primarily because we haven't got any solid working examples of when that's happened with the data it's been collecting and so on to really fully understand that. But yeah, I think in the future that's going to also be a great kind of risk and safety thing for users, that they will be able to detect abnormalities effectively in the data, and even if it's not being hacked, like withdrawing for a very short period of time and then redepositing again if it needs to, is obviously probably a really beneficial thing from a user point of view.
Completely to your point, maybe it's going to be also a combination, right, between AI respiration and also human respiration. It can be that there might be complementarity between these two areas. But I just want to say that make me sleep better, these things, because I mean, come on, like already just 1 year ago when there wasn't this kind of real-time respiration, I had alarm ringing during the night when something was happening. It was not nice, This farming experience was a little bit disruptive also for the sleeping quality. But I'm
yeah. I feel you.
I still remember when I woke up and my girlfriend looked at me and said, no, there is USDC at 0.80, and I say, this is not possible, go back to sleep. And then I checked CoinMarketCap. Anyway, you were there.
Yeah. I remember that day well, that couple of days. It was a Friday evening. Yeah.
That was fun. Okay, but, it's good to be in the trenches enough, to have been surviving to survive so many things. Very cool. Let's go to the next topic that I think it's a very hot topic and also controversial to a certain extent. Let's talk about account abstraction. You mentioned that account abstraction is one of the important point, one of the foundation also of the UX improvement that Summerfy is bringing to the table. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So account abstraction ultimately means that users no longer have to rely on seed phrases and so on, and can connect to kind of DeFi apps and self-custodial protocols in slightly easier ways than they would have been able to several years ago. For example, just using Google login, using like X login, Discord logins, or whatever, using passkey on their phone now, like facial recognition and so on, and effectively having their private keys stored through kind of different ways, and so on. So that obviously brings a huge amount of kind of UX improvement to it. Like the concept of people being their own bank is obviously pretty scary. 2018, 2019, 2020, that was kind of like the audience that we had, kind of pre-COVID in a way, when like TVLs were like TVLs 50 million, 100 million were like huge, and so on. Like that was okay. Like people could handle seed phrases. There were still people obviously losing them and so on, and forgetting about them and things like that, particularly when the markets went down, they disappeared for a year. But now with more and more kind of, let's say, retail people coming in, the concept of them having to write down and not store it on a computer, not email it to themselves because they think their email is secure and going to be there, not kind of copy it to their notes app on their phone and so on, or even text it in like a WhatsApp message to their friend or their mum or something like that. Now with account abstraction, you can sign up using, like I said, Google, social login, email addresses, phone numbers in some cases, and it's a whole lot easier. But there's obviously a huge risk. It's not quite as secure as well. Like we all know, kind of Google hacks, like email hacks, happen all the time. There is tons of phishing, like email scams all of the time. I'm getting like a Google reset password text message about 5 times a day at the moment saying someone's trying to reset my password, but it goes to a phishing site. But like, I'm aware of that, and like if you had I suspect like probably 90% of my friends would probably put their email and password into this phishing site, and if they've signed up to an app that relies on their email to do this thing, then and they've put like a large chunk of their life savings in there because they're chasing this like ETH rise or Bitcoin rise or like 10% DeFi yields and so on, then they're very easily gonna lose their money. Basically, like it will be gone before they've realized it, and so on. So with almost any UX play comes obviously the difficulty in maintaining the highest level of security, and so on. There's obviously things that you can do to improve the security. You can kind of create it like a kind of multi-sig, in a way. You can have multi confirmations and so on, but that's all well and good and sounds good in principle on there. But in reality, for the people we're ultimately trying to target, I think, and really get into DeFi, we're not expecting to go through all these hoops and create all these backups and so on. I think most apps now have 2-factor authentication and so on. It's becoming a little bit more normal and expected and so on. But yeah, I think that sometimes people are just gonna skip all that. We're gonna see if it works, see what it's like, start to put money in, see that they probably make a little bit of money, put some more money in, and the kind of 2-factor security and things like that will kind of just almost be disregarded and forgotten about, I think. So from a UX point of view, it's really awesome. It does make it a lot easier. We actually, like when Oasis app launched a DeFi wallet back in the Maker Foundation back in 2020, we actually put Magic Link, so kind of almost like the first version of account abstraction on there. Like you could just sign up with your email. It sent your email a code. You clicked on the link and it entered the code for you, and that was it. Like that was the kind of first level of account abstraction in a way, not with the kind of smart contracts and stuff behind the scene that we have now, but did it in a very, very, very nice and easy way. And that was hugely popular when we had the kind of DAI app just before kind of gas prices absolutely shot to like insane numbers and so on. And then mainnet and L2s weren't around then, and mainnet became difficult. So we saw a huge take up of it then. On Summerfy, we haven't seen as big a take up of it at the moment. I touched on it earlier. Like I think we're still quite well associated on the actual DeFi side. We still got a lot of kind of like DeFi early adopters and so on using that app. But yeah, we are seeing the numbers grow. We are seeing the number of signatures and number of like kind of account abstracted wallets creations increasing, and so on. But we have to be very conscious of the the security risks and so on. And just because you don't need to store your own keys and so on doesn't mean it's safer. It makes it easier, but it doesn't necessarily make it safer. But yeah, we have to be able to onboard people better. And maybe that's a sacrifice a little bit, but we still need to remember it's DeFi and it's self-custodial, and there's no getting the money back. There's no reversing of transactions. There's no one necessarily to complain to, like at the blockchain level. Like you can't just email Vitalik to ask him to send your money back or anything like that. As well as like many people still expect that to be the case with like DeFi protocols. Like, hey, someone stole my money. Like, okay, I'm really sorry. There's literally nothing that can happen and be done. And it sounds harsh, but it just has to be a learning opportunity. But the next 100 million people to do it, we can't have like 100 million learning opportunities. So we're going to have to find ways of improving it, of making it better, making it clearer. And people just need to like learn that their email accounts are not maybe as secure as they probably think they are, just because they've got some fancy password with like 2 symbols at the end or something like that.
Well, thanks a lot also for, explaining a little bit better that, better UX is not always equal better security, right? But apart from social login, I think there are a lot of also additional opportunities with account abstraction and in general smart wallet. One is, for example, bundling the transaction. Another one, it can be, having a different paymaster and so on and so forth. Maybe do you want to also add a little bit more juice on that?
Yeah. So there's obviously, as well as, the downside of security and so on is obviously the better stuff. Obviously, a lot of apps now using account abstraction can bundle transactions. For us, like we've bundled transactions together since 2021. Like that isn't really anything new. Well, since 2019, really, when we kind of create the first multi-call contracts and so on. So bundling isn't necessarily anything new from our point of view. Like the bundling is no different if you use an EOA or account abstraction on Summerfy side. But like on Summerfy in particular, if you use Base or Arbitrum and you use account abstraction, then you don't pay any gas fees. They're all sponsored for you. You don't need to fund your wallet with ETH. Which is really, really, really nice, and that's the kind of killer play for most apps as well. That the fact that particularly on something like Summer, where it's primarily a stable coin product for more retail users, then you only have to like deposit USDC, USDT, or EURC. You don't need to worry about ETH. You don't have to even understand what ETH is in some cases. Although from our point of view, we'd like to educate them on what that is. But they get their transactions for free. It makes it super easy to use, super simple, looks more like a fintech app. And this is where, like, obviously moving into the future, like that can be expanded even further. Mainnet is still probably too expensive for most apps to be able to sponsor people on Mainnet. So we have to onboard people into L2s like Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, Unichain, Inc. Any kind of one of the main L2s at the moment. Really where gas is still fairly cheap and can be sponsored by the underlying products and so on. But ignoring the security side, like the ease of login, the ease of getting started, the ease of then using some of the on-ramps that are supported within some of these account abstraction kits as well, and just generally just on-ramping into these wallets is super, super easy. And then not needing gas just makes it very, very easy. And we talk a lot about DeFi products as well, but in reality, account abstraction is probably great for like many other use cases like gaming and games and on-chain games and things like that. And even like NFTs and collectibles, again, that you shouldn't need to really necessarily understand the concept of ETH, even if it's maybe paying for the transactions in just USD or dollars. Basically, that account abstraction makes that a lot easier. Again, there was always solutions before that to kind of abstract it away, but it was much more complex. And even then you were signing obscure transaction signatures and so on, which again, the ordinary person wouldn't have even thought twice about, which then opens up the market to scams and so on. But so yes, it's got a huge amount of UX improvements and it's definitely a way forward for the industry, but we just need to be conscious of the security aspects, and that's the responsibility of the apps and the products to make sure it's very, very clear to the users like what the risks are and how they can best mitigate those risks, and adding kind of like 2FAs and stuff onto this stuff.
What do you think that, at least in my feeling is that we have been lagging behind the usage of account abstraction because we have the tech for quite some time. Okay, then everything improved also with Pectra and so on and so forth, but we had this technology already there. But I think the last stats was that less than 10% of the total wallets are basically smart wallets or account abstracted wallet, whatever we want to call it. Why do you think, the classical DeFi user seems not really going in that direction?
I actually still don't think we're seeing much of a like an influx of people to like ordinary people back to DeFi in 2021 with the rise of NFTs and the kind of like almost vegetable farming within DeFi and so on. Like it created a huge amount of interest into like crypto and on-chain and DeFi in particular. A lot of people came in, a lot of people saw there was a lot of money to be made with all of these kind of like farmable tokens and so on. With the NFTs, people were buying NFTs left, right and center and so on. But I think we all have to be conscious that a lot of people lost a lot of money in 22 and ultimately retail people are one of the ones that lost the most amount of money, like relatively, as in like proportion of their probably savings and wealth and so on. And I think the harsh reality is we just haven't seen that many people yet coming back on chain to do some of this stuff that we would have liked. I think like we talk about kind of DeFi summers and repeated DeFi summers and so on. But yeah, like if the current market rally kind of carries on like it has been the last few days, then I think that will probably be the catalyst for bringing a lot of people back on. We're seeing a lot of institutions like talking about crypto, talking about stable coins, introducing their own stable coins, like tokenized shares and stocks and so on. Like that will obviously probably be a nice catalyst to bring people in because it will be a positive and there might be an opportunity for them to see how they can make money again. But generally, like retail users need to know that, or need to see that they're gonna win. And reality is that the only way they win is by making a lot of money. And in most people's eyes, like humans as a nature, like we're greedy. And I don't think we probably had that like kind of narrative yet for a long enough time that's going to have brought people in. And I think most people using DeFi probably have still been around for quite a long time, know what they're doing, have had EOA accounts, still trust the kind of managing their keys and so on. And yeah, we're still waiting for that big influx. And I think, to be honest with you, it may not come if we also do our job really, really well, because in order for like DeFi to really be adopted and self-custodial protocols and stuff to really be adopted, I think we also have to take a step back of everyone being like the kind of idea and dream of everyone being their own bank and so on, because we talked about how difficult that is, even with account abstraction. And the way that we really grow on-chain adoption and DeFi in particular and so on is by actually integrating into the apps they're already using today, integrating into the kind of centralized apps. Yes, that might take away like one layer of like the self-custody of their funds and so on a little bit, because they are having to like go through KYC apps and so on to access this underlying technology. But I think that is ultimately the way we onboard the next 100 million, 200 million, billion people basically on chain, is that we do it through the apps they already use today. And that means that we may never see the vast adoption of like maybe like account abstraction, smart accounts and so on there, because actually if we've done our job really well and we've got this technology integrated into the existing infrastructure that already exists today, then we're bringing people into this new financial system that is transparent, that is like that. Again, I mentioned it earlier, everyone does play by the same rules ultimately, everyone has the same opportunities basically, but it's one layer behind. It's kind of a level behind. It's kind of wrapped in this abstraction layer effectively of a probably KYC'd AML'd app interface, which may not fit that well with the original vision of kind of be your own bank for everybody. But I think the realism side is that's where the core adoption lies in the future, and we're not going to have a billion people using protocol front ends with or without account abstraction. I don't think. So bringing a billion people online is maybe the base app proves us wrong a little bit, right? And like maybe they do bring a billion people online through that and into this system and so on. But yeah, I think in reality, all of your like kind of neobanks, like your kind of digital wealth apps, like your savings apps, there's so many of these financial apps now. Very, very few ultimately support crypto and DeFi. In particular, more and more supporting crypto at the very basic level, but it's custody crypto. Think kind of Celsius back in the day and so on, Like we can do much better than recreating Celsius or something. Like we can make available like DeFi and self-custodial crypto and so on available within these existing apps without going down the Celsius route.
Yeah, completely agree with you. From the last A16Z report about DeFi, their estimation that we have around 30 million active users in DeFi for real. So in the end, it's really a few of us. And probably I agree with you that maybe large adoption will come through integration on the everyday app. But the question for you that is more probably, I don't know, philosophical, if you want, are we winning or are we losing in this way? I mean, I don't know. What's your feeling about it? So maybe we're going to use much more DeFi as a sort of backend of a fintech app, like is also happening, maybe with Robinhood, launching on Arbitrum and so on and so forth. But is it good? Are we going in the right direction? Are we winning as DeFi Maxi or are we losing? I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
I still think we're winning. I still think we're moving to this new modern, transparent financial system, which is in, like the rules are enforceable by code and so on. Like as opposed to the kind of like my mate's dad is the bank manager, he can get you an extra like 1% savings and stuff. I'll tell him to add it to your account and so on. Like that doesn't happen really in DeFi. There's obviously protocols out there that are centrally controlled and have backdoors and things like that, and those things will pop up. But I still think that everything is on chain. If you think of all the kind of over collateralized borrow lend protocols and so on, everything is enforced by code. If you go beyond your liquidation LTV, you are going to get liquidated. Like it doesn't matter who your mate's best friend's dad is or whatever. Like they can't save you, and so on. Like that. If we can move away from those systems where everything is a black box, like as it is today, there are constantly big banks being accused of like breaking anti-money laundering rules and so on. Like way more value than we ever talk about within like kind of crypto and DeFi in reality and so on. But if we can move from those black boxes, from those kind of mates rates and so on into this more transparent system, I truly believe that's ultimately what we got into this space for and so on. And it was obviously a great vision to everyone be your own bank, but UX always wins, and be your own bank is not a good UX in reality. And yeah, I think if we can move to this new transparent financial system that lives on chain, that has also the ability to have a load of other things kind of added to it around it, like the blockchain and stuff is not just DeFi, it's all other kind of aspects of life can be added to it as well. Maybe not everything that like we got excited about in 2017, 2018, where everything was being put on the blockchain and it kind of wasn't needed. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a huge win. Still, just to if we can try and move on from that legacy like infrastructure that creates fraud and dodgy deals and is open to be manipulated and cause crashes like in 2008 where things could just be kind of done again and again and again without the underlying collateral really being there. Like that's what you can't do so much in this space, and the fact it's transparent is a huge win. So if we end up moving to a world where like large institutions have their own private blockchains which are completely privatized and not transparent or anything like that, and they try and claim that as kind of like DeFi and things like that, then I think we're back to square one and we haven't won. I think we have to use something like Ethereum and the supported L2s and that kind of base network basically in order to say we've won. But I do think at the moment we're winning.
Okay, I see your point. Essentially, as long as we bring, equality and transparency, we will still be better off, right? Instead of
100%
having financial institutions being the gatekeepers, using a fractional reserve, all the type of things that, as we know, they never really helped, our society, and they helped mostly financial exclusion. Also, just I want to remind, because I think at least once every podcast I need to remind everyone listening that the majority of money laundering is not done via blockchain. It's actually done via the system. Actually, the estimation is like 1% doing via blockchain technology. It's extremely different to do it via blockchain technology because so far it is transparent. And also when we discussed, for example, with one of the founder of Wirex, they told us, guys, As long as there is a bank transaction is where we have a problem. When we have a blockchain transaction, most of the time we know exactly where it comes from, if people are doing some malicious things or not. So I think we need to keep repeating it, because we need to debunk this myth once and forever, ideally.
100%. But I think that's an argument we're never going to win with like kind of large, big scale bankers, big name regulators and so on, right? It's always an argument they put forward and control public perception about. And yeah, which is why I think as well, like we can't get stuck in that, because it's a very difficult one to win. So we just have to prove it. In some cases, prove it with the transparency that we have, and so on, with like kind of actions instead of words.
Yeah, absolutely with you. So how do you see these things going forward? I think we have been discussing a little bit of how TradFi is entering to DeFi, how DeFi might become or is becoming maybe the back end, of the financial institution, in particular about stablecoin. Stablecoin, I think we won on that level somehow. How do you see these things going forward between TradFi and DeFi? Is it an evolution, a revolution? Is it integration? Is it conflict? How do you see this integration or conflict going forward in the next 5 to 10 years, or 3 years, 3, 5, 10?
Yeah. So I think we were probably in a conflict stage more so the last couple of years, but I think this year in particular, things are moving pretty fast now, more on the integration side. I think many more apps are open. I think kind of it's becoming more trusted. I think with the Genius Act and so on, and seeing kind of all of these big, particularly US banks and institutions and so on, now opening their arms and saying, hey, we want to be involved. They're like, obviously rumors are they're all going to be creating their own stable coins and so on, and competing with each other on that level. But that creates the trust and legitimacy, I think, for then the ordinary app integrators and so on to start integrating DeFi and so on. We're certainly kind of seeing that a little bit now as well, kind of seeing them being kind of more open. You read the news reports and stuff of like certain apps now integrating more and more of DeFi and so on. And it's just about bringing kind of on-chain yield, on-chain products, on-chain services and so on into these apps. And yeah, I think that over the next 2-3 years, we're going to just see integration after integration after integration. And I think the amount of like kind of probably TVL and in particular probably transactions that are happening, we're going to start to see that move heavily probably over towards the happening through integrators as opposed to happening on like kind of EOAs on direct like front end protocols and so on. So yeah, that's our view. That's kind of what we've built the Summerify, like the Lazy Summer protocol and stuff for. Like it's been designed to be integrated into both institutions and kind of fintech TradFi apps as well, both for end users or kind of from a B2B side. And yeah, we think that's the way we're going. We think probably there'll probably be a big domination of stables. Obviously, like most people save in stables. In reality, there'll still be, I think, a big uptake on like people holding ETH and BTC in particular, and that's why we have like ETH products on there. We've got some BTC products coming soon as well. But yeah, at the moment, obviously ETH dominates, but we can see stables being the main product in 3 to 5 years, because that is what most people save in and will need to save in ultimately moving forward.
Well, I mean, I think it's I think a fair prediction that the majority of the volume transaction will come probably mostly from, let's say, entities that are already operating in the TradFi world somehow. Maybe in the future, this division between TradFi and DeFi will not even be known, right? Maybe the son or son will not know what we're talking about when we basically put the division was only relevant for us. Say, yeah, TradFi, DeFi, what are you talking about, my friend? But cool. And what do you think today? Because we have a big audience of builders. What do you think we will need to build today, potentially to facilitate this integration, right, between the DeFi world and TradFi world, or the fintech world? Probably the fintech will adopt faster, our DeFi yield and things. Yeah. What are the missing pieces?
I think probably easy ways for some of these integrators to be able to like manage the accounts of underlying users and so on. I think like one thing we probably like would make these things a lot easier, and it will depend on how regulations go from a protocol level and so on, but some sort of like kind of on-chain identity, like verified identity and so on. Like even today with TradFi apps, fintech apps and so on, the amount of different KYC and AML you have to jump through every time you want to try a new app or even onboard like deposit from a new place or something like that. You have to jump through all these hoops and hurdles. That obviously can be massively simplified. Isn't an absolute need, but if I think possibly eventually most protocols are going to be pushed to possibly need to maybe KYC and stuff users or just verify they're on some sort of like whitelist and so on. In reality, I think that's the kind of the difficulty and so, but we have the technology for users to be able to do that easily, take their kind of pass around and so with them. But yeah, I think from an integrator point of view, they need the regulations to be clear globally. Like obviously in each country they operate, they need the regulations to be clear. That's the one thing that's going to hold a lot of them back in the short term. We've seen the Genius Act in the US open the door a little bit now to stables and so on, and stable coins, possibly payments then as well. But yeah, the regulations is going to hold back most integrators on there, because they will have big legal teams, compliance teams or whatever, kind of umming and ahhing, I think, around, I'm not sure if we can allow our users to use that. I don't know if we can show that to our users. I don't know if we can explain that to our users and so on. So yeah, regulations are obviously there in theory to protect users. But yeah, like the best way they can ultimately be used is by bringing them in sooner to allow legitimate real apps to be able to offer their users products, because the users are going to go searching for these products anyway. And if it's in a completely unregulated world, the chance of them coming across scams and fake apps is way higher possibility. And we already see that every day pretty much anyway. So I think the sooner regulators can probably work with the industry, regulate the stuff, allow it to be integrated easily into fintech and TradFi, then the reality is the much fewer people are going to be scammed, and so on. And banks and so on will stop needing to block everyone's accounts for trying to transfer money into crypto, because we still see that in the UK particularly. Like lots of banks will just block your account if you try and deposit into Coinbase or Kraken or anything like that, and your account's immediately blacklisted. So yeah, the sooner we can regulate this market, I think obviously the faster the adoption will be, but then the better the experience will be for the underlying users, and in reality, fewer people will get hurt.
Completely agree with you, and I like that you mentioned in trying to maybe avoiding KYC, uses ZK magic, to prove maybe that you have this specific type, you met some specific type of requirement,
Yep.
instead of going through max pain every single time when you need to do KYC, KYB, right? It's just
100%.
paying for users. So I wish this will get to that very, very quickly, because I think it's an enormous improvement for the user and for our society almost. You've been in this space. Let's try to wrap up this fantastic discussion with you, just for the sake of time. But I really enjoyed it. I would like to ask you, when we're going a little bit toward the end, you have been in this space for a very long time. You have seen a lot of things happening and changing. As you can see, also you have a very, very broad vision also on the integration between TradFi and DeFi. So if you want to provide the most important learning that you were able to collect, during your journey for DeFi builders, what would it be?
Probably whatever you think is going to happen in 2 years' time, it's going to be completely different. So like if you've got a product that you can build and get out the door that solves a real problem for users today, get it out, build it as fast as you can, get it out the door and prove the concept. If you're building something that you're planning on releasing in 2 years' time, chances are the ecosystem's changed so much that the product will either be outdated or something's come along that does it in a new, faster or more efficient way, or something. So the space moves incredibly fast, and yeah, you've got to move quite fast. That isn't to say like the kind of old Facebook adage of move fast and break things when it comes to smart contracts and kind of custody and so on, because that obviously can lead to problems. But if you're building a product or an app on top of a lot of this stuff, then get it out there, test it with users, find that kind of product market fit as fast as possible, from a builder's point of view, and get it going. Because in 2 years' time, no matter what we think, like wherever we think the direction is kind of going, like every 2 years in DeFi, many driven by market dynamics as well, where people have to suddenly come up with new solutions for something that changed because of a market crash or a market rally. Things change so much, and an idea now to release in 2 years' time is probably outdated.
Completely agree with you. So hit the market fast, to track your conclusions, see if there is product market fit, break things, but moderately, because smart contract creator.
Yeah.
The break, we have seen it so many times. So,
Yeah.
moderately, break things moderately, and test the market. I think it's a great suggestion. And but if people want to connect with you or follow you, maybe you want to share your Twitter handle or something like that, how they can get in touch with you or stay in touch with you.
Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm Crispy Ducky on Twitter, but yeah, find me in Summerfy. You can join the Summerfy Discord, Summerfinance _ on Twitter as well. But yeah, you'll find me on the Discord, find me on the Twitter, but otherwise, yeah, come and try Summerfy.
Fantastic. Try Summerfy and try the Lazy Summer. That is fantastic.
Yeah,
the yield on
so.
USDC is pretty juicy. No financial advice, but it's USDC.E on Sonic, just for the record. Okay, great, Chris. It has been fantastic discussing with you. Super interesting your takes on from account abstraction to AI to in general the future between DeFi and TradFi. We hope to have you again, to have you here again, in the future, so we can reassess how the things are moving, if we were right, if we were wrong. The future is always a surprise, and thanks God that it's like that. For all our audience, HyperNest is an accelerator only for DeFi, so if you're building something very cool, just hit us. We are interested to learn what you're doing, and we can invest in you and support you. And if you're just, DeFi savvy guys, just following us and subscribe our podcast to get more information about the magical world of DeFi. Thanks again, Chris, and see you soon on the next podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.